All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today we're looking at Week 12 in college football. Kind of a dry week, but the games we have on tap, I think they're all going to be pretty solid and definitely worth tuning into. Kicking things off, top 10 matchup between Michigan State and Ohio State. The Buckeyes, 19-point favorites in a Big Ten playoff eliminator, noon on ABC. You know, this Michigan State offense has been really good this year. Kenneth Walker having a Heisman-like season. He's one of the favorites right now. Over 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns. He's been a star after contact. He's tough to bring down. Usually he bounces off that first defender and makes the defense pay. So wrapping him up is going to be an important part of this game for the Buckeyes. Peyton Thorne, he's shown he can air it out. The play action works very well for them. The biggest problem for them is they really struggle to throw if they can't run the ball. Nebraska, Indiana, those games, for example, it's been tough. If they can't run the ball, they don't have that play action. You've seen it against Michigan. They couldn't really throw the ball either. They were running pretty well, though. Trey Mosley, Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed, he's a phenomenal playmaker for them. You're going to see this offense roll out, bunch sets, multiple tight ends. This offensive line's been playing really good. It's going to come down to hats on hats, really, against this Michigan State offense. Ohio State, though, they're really good against the run. After the first 2 weeks, they got kind of torched. All parts of their defense, really, in the first few weeks got torched. They've been much better down the stretch here against the run. 3.3 yards per carry versus Power 5 opponents this season. Haskell Garrett, Tariq Smith, Zach Harrison, Williams. These guys are very solid. It's a collective effort. This defensive line is very good. Trajada Mitchell and Cody Simon have really settled in because defensive positioning was a big deal for them. They're getting better. The secondary isn't great by any means. They got flat out beat in coverage against Penn State. They weren't winning one-on-one matchups. The DBs were not making great plays. They couldn't cover in the flat against Purdue last week. And, so the secondary is still a work in progress. Their front seven, though, is going to be leaned on heavily for the rest of the year. It's going to be quintessential to their success. I think the biggest matchup, though, is this Michigan State pass defense, dead last in college football. Soft coverage really hurts them, especially on the boundaries. They struggle to cover the middle of the field. They're playing a phenomenal passing attack. Ohio State leads the nation in scoring and yards per game. The balance they have, Travion Henderson, who has 1,200 yards, 15 scores on the year. The receiving trio, Jackson Smith, Najiba, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, 50-plus receptions, 700-plus yards for all three of them. That's outstanding production through, it's mid-November, and that's the numbers they have. That's just insane. Stroud, he's playing great. The touches, he's showcasing his touch, the accuracy. Most importantly, though, the timing. He's really gotten that down as the years went on. It's going to make this offense really hard to defend when they got chemistry like this going. They also have one of the nation's top offensive lines. Despite the pass rush that Michigan State has, it's solid. Jacob Pajnuk, Jeff Petrowski, they're solid, but they disappeared against Michigan. That's also one of the nation's best offensive lines. Another tough matchup here. I think they got to be able to tackle underneath soundly, fluster CJ a bit. I don't think that's going to happen. And the reason they got to do that, they have to get great pressure because dead last in college football pass defense, they're just going to be in for a nightmare of a day. Purdue had almost 600 yards passing on them. Just name an opponent, they've absolutely throttled them through the air. Since the Miami game, I've not been impressed with this defense. That was all the way back in September, I'm pretty sure. So 45-30 is the pick here, Ohio State. I think Michigan State will be able to keep pace a little bit with offense. But eventually Ohio State, they're going to start making plays that's going to give their offense the ball, and I think they're going to score on a high percentage of their drives because they just have such a phenomenal matchup here. I mean, the talent they have at pass catcher against the worst secondary in college football statistically, it's going to be a barrage. But I think the spread's kind of ridiculous that it's a 20. It's understandable because they're going on the road. It's kind of disrespectful to Michigan State, though. I think this offense, they'll score a good bit. But will it be enough to beat Ohio State? I don't think so. Looking at Wake Forest and Clemson, Clemson, they're really beat up. Injuries on both sides of the ball. Justin Ross is now out for the year. I think the struggles in the secondary, that's really going to be a big matchup here. They're facing Robertson and A.T. Perry, two phenomenal receivers. Probably one of the nation's top three receiving duos. And they're playing Sam Hartman. Clemson, they have a nice edge in the trenches, though. I think running the ball has been hard for them, but they're playing one of the worst run defenses in college football. Getting Will Shipley back, the explosiveness that he provides, Kobe Pace. That's going to be really the only shot to win. I do think they have a solid matchup against a coverage unit that's really struggled underneath. This passing attack's nothing to blemish about, though. It's not great. I think they're going to be able to get some short routes, curls, slants, some short routes that are really going to open things up a little bit for them to get to shorter downs and distances. It's going to allow them to run the ball. The defense really struggled when Brian Brissett and Tyler Davis went down on the interior. They've started to get back to form a little bit with Tyler Davis coming back. I think Louisville had a really good day, but the Clemson defense stepped up when it needed to. They were able to keep them out of the end zone late in that game. They're only allowed 15.3 points per game. The defense is still rock solid for what they've been tasked with how bad this offense has been. They've not helped them out one bit. So the defense, they've been very stout. James Skowski playing very good ball. Back to the struggles in the secondary, though. When they played Pitt, I was like, they're going to lose this game because the secondary has been very inconsistent. You've seen it against Syracuse, and then what do you know, in that Pitt game, they get beat on 2 one-on-one matchups downfield. The safeties, they've not been able to cover very well this year, especially Nolan Turner. He's been a liability in that secondary. So they're going to have to start getting some good interior pass rush. I think Miles Murphy off the edge as well is going to do some work. This is a real toss-up. Everyone's going to pick Wake Forest. I don't think there's a single person that's going to pick Clemson. But I think they're going to run the ball pretty solid. I think they're going to get some good pressure on the interior to help their secondary out a bit. Being at home is a big help. So I think Clemson's going to win this game 23-21. It's going to be very close. I'm not even convinced Clemson can get that many points, even with the matchup they have on the ground. But trendy. It's going to be Clemson. They're going to be a trendy pick, at least for me. No one, I don't think, is going to pick them, and for that reason alone, it's college football. So I think you should go with them. And I think they can play a pretty good game here. Wake Forest is also Dave Clawson. These guys have never looked good against Clemson, even with some of their best football teams have struggled immensely. So going on the road here is not going to be any easier, especially even against a team that's down bad. I don't think they have a great advantage, so I think Clemson's going to be able to pull this one off. The noon slate is pretty good. You got Iowa State and Oklahoma. Iowa State always gives them problems. Both of these teams are kind of up and down here the last couple of weeks. Oklahoma's coming off that bad loss to Baylor where they got absolutely smacked on offense. That's the worst offensive performance we've ever seen from Oklahoma. Not just a Lincoln Riley team, I think ever, though. It's been a long time since they've gotten hit in the mouth like that. I think the OU offense, I think they're going to get back. They're going to bounce back. Hill Williams is going to have a good game. He's still a freshman, incredibly young. Kennedy Brooks in this offensive line. They're playing a defense that's been pretty inconsistent against West Virginia and Texas Tech. They were, flat out terrible. You sandwich in between those two games. They played Texas where they stonewalled them. Texas had 204 yards of offense, something like that. They could not do anything. Nice pass rushing duo. Uwazurki, Will McDonald. These guys are great. They combined for 17 sacks, I think. McDonald has 10 of those. Mike Rose at linebacker, Ryan Vance. They're incredibly talented, the front seven. Got a nice little matchup against an offensive line that's clearly having its struggles. The Iowa State secondary, they got burned the last two games. Marvin Mims, Jaden Hazelwood, Mike Woods, they got some playmakers. They're going to ready to pounce on that. I think they will. I think Oklahoma's offense is going to get back to its form. The only thing that's really been a certainty, though, is how good the Iowa State offense has been the last 3 weeks. 400-plus yards, over 6 yards per play, all three of those contests. And the Sooner defense, I picked Baylor to beat them, but I thought they would do better through the air and they would struggle a little bit more on the ground. It was the complete opposite. They 300 rushing yards. They just demolished them, really. That's very concerning because this zone coverage OU displays is not very good. They get beat on the outside with some inexperienced corners. You've seen Tyquan Thornton win a one-on-one matchup in the red zone from bad positioning from the DB. It's just the secondary is very concerning, and then the running game got burned last week despite having this great defensive line led by, Perrigan Winfrey, Isaiah Coe, Isaiah Thomas. So I'm going to pick Iowa State in this game. It seems like a bad spot to play Iowa State because their defense, they're not going to stay bad for long. Matt Campbell, they usually figure things out. They're incredibly disciplined in the trenches. So I think they're going to have some good balance on offense. I think their defensive playmakers are going to step up. I think you're going to see plenty of success from both teams on both sides of the ball. But it's still going to be a high-scoring game. That's why I say you're going to see spurts of success. 34-30 is the prediction for Iowa State. I just think they're going to have the balance, their defense. I think they're just going to play a better game than Oklahoma. So I'm going to pick the Cyclones, but this is another one that's really a toss-up. Arkansas and Alabama meet 3:30 on CBS. 21-point favorites, already tied. This defense has really struggled at times, especially with positioning. I think they've gotten better as the years went on, especially against the run. Henry Teoto Federian Mathis. Will Anderson's having a phenomenal 23 tackles for loss in 10 games. That's pretty insane. He's on track for probably 30 plus. That's phenomenal work from him. They've been much better against the run. Positioning has still kind of plagued them. They had a run against LSU that almost ended up costing them the game. Against Tennessee, they were pretty lackluster in the secondary. So I think I'm just going to go on a limb and say the Arkansas offense has some success. KJ Jefferson, Traylon Smith, Traylon Burks at receiver. I think he'll make some big plays. But more importantly, I think this running game's going to have some success. Dominique Johnson, they have some. They got a nice group of backs. And Jefferson, what he gives them as a runner, with the big frame he possesses, I think they'll do a pretty solid job. I think this is a big game for Alabama, though, not just because it's ranked, because they're not really blowing people out. They've got to really show they're worthy of being the number 2 team that could potentially beat Georgia. It's a very big game. Very interested to see how they defend the run. I think Arkansas will have some mild success. I think they'll score 20 points. For the Razorbacks, though, outside of Trey Williams, the pass rush has not been very good. They had a 3-week stretch against very prominent opponents. Georgia, Mississippi. 0 sacks any of those 3 games. 3 each of the past 3 of those, so they're kind of getting back to form. I think the linebacking trio, they're going to play a very good game. Grant Morgan, Bumper Poole, Hayden Henry. I think they're going to slow down the running game a good bit. I don't see Bama going for 300. I think they'll average about 4 yards per carry, maybe the 150, 170 mark. They'll do a pretty solid job of slowing them down. I don't think they're going to get absolutely blasted. Just the physicality they had early in the year, it was kind of short-lived. They've not really showed it since. I think Alabama, they're going to show up physically. 42-20 is the pick. I think Jameson Williams and John Mechie are going to make some big plays because the secondary's not great since Jalen Catalon went down. Monteric Brown, he's had a pretty good year on the outside as a corner, so that's going to be a matchup to watch with him. Bryce Young and these receivers. I think they're going to make some big plays. They'll do an admirable job of running the ball. So I see Bama 42-20. I'd rather stay away from this if I'm a better, though. Very interesting game, though. I think this is plenty of implications in this game. Even though Alabama will win the game regardless, I think the final score and how they play ultimately is really going to be very interesting for me and a lot of other people. But I think Bama will control the line of scrimmage, and that's going to pay the difference. That's going to be SMU and Cincinnati, a big game for the Bearcats. They've been really struggling to down opponents here the last couple of weeks. It's really hurting their playoff spot. They have a great matchup, though, against one of the worst secondaries in college football. SMU struggles big time to, not give up big plays. It's just not something they can do. Desmond Ridder and a nice group of receivers. Michael Young, Alec Pierce. I like Josh Wiley at tight end. Trey Tucker, he's pretty versatile. I think they'll give him a good bit of touches. Jerome Ford, he's questionable with an ankle. Even if he doesn't play, though, it's going to be a committee of runners for the Bearcats. They're playing a very tough run defense, though. SMU's been very good the last couple of weeks against Memphis and Houston. They held them both to under 80 yards rushing, and that's very impressive. This defense has really come a long way, but they also they lost both of those games because they gave up 400 plus through the year, so it didn't come with much upside. Wilson, Elijah Chapman, they've combined for 19.5 tackles for loss. I like the pass rush they have with those two and Turner Coxey. Very respectable front seven. Delano Robinson, Shane Haley, a linebacker. They've been very good. So I think SMU, their defense is not going to get blown out the water in this game. I think they're going to show up a little bit. I think Cincinnati, though, their defense as a whole is still very impressive. Last year when they played high-powered offenses, Memphis, SMU, UCF, they held them all to under 400 yards. They really had their number. This defense is nothing to blemish, but these guys are really good. Like the secondary they have, it's one of the best in college football. 16 picks, that's second in FBS. This 3-3-5 features a lot of experience. Ahmad Gardner's been solid in man coverage. Darian Beavers at linebacker. He's one of the top players at his position. This guy's a phenomenal playmaker for them. All around, though, a senior secondary. There's 4 of them. Brian Cook, Javon Hicks are 2 of the notables. I like what these guys bring to the table. I think they're going to do a good job slowing down this efficient and effective passing game of Terran Mordecai and his explosive group of receivers, Rashee Rice and Danny Gray being the most notables. 35-26 is the pick. I'm going with Cincinnati. I think they're going to do a good job with balance. I think Desmond Ridder will have a nice game. I think you're going to see him throw 300 plus. But the SMU defense is not terrible by any means, so I think they're going to come up with some big plays. I think they'll get a couple stops in the red zone. They keep a little bit close, but I think ultimately the Bearcats, they've not really struggled against offenses at all the last couple of years under Luke Fickell, especially these high-powered ones in conference. So I think they're going to do very well on Saturday. This is a very big game for them in their playoff hopes. And Utah, everyone's going to go with Utah in this game for good reason. You know, they're in Salt Lake City. This is a good Utes football team. Cameron Rising's been giving them some good play. They have nice balance with a trio of runners and Micah Bernard, Tavion Thomas, TJ Pledger. Like what they bring to the table. Their defense has been led by Mike Tafu and Devin Lloyd, who is probably the nation's best inside linebacker. This guy's having a phenomenal year on the stat sheet. 19.5 tackles for loss. He also leads them in tackles and sacks. I think he leads them in interceptions as well. He's just been so good for them. They're making the case for why the Utes will not win, though, is they don't have a downfield passing game. It's one of the worst in college football. Their top receivers are 2 tight ends. Brown Cooley's very good, though, so no slouch on his name by any means. But still, they don't have a downfield passing game one bit. They're playing a very good secondary, a bend but don't break secondary. That's plenty of playmakers like Michael Wright, Verone McKinley. They're playing a very tough pass rush, too. They're getting healthier. Swinson's getting better. Kayvon Thibodeau, he's the nation's best defensive player. You've seen what he did against UCLA. If you didn't, go watch. He had like 4.5 tackles for loss. They couldn't stop him. It was just insane. Every play after play. Kayvon Thibodeau, he's a complete game wrecker. Oregon, I'm picking them to win this game. Utah, despite how good their defense has been, the 3 losses they have against Oregon State, BYU, and San Diego State, those teams, including Oregon, all have something in common. Great offensive line, or a good/great offensive line that is also got a great running game. Oregon, they possess that, a very good offensive line, especially in the interior with Forsyth and Bass. They have a very dynamic running game with Anthony Brown. Troy Dye has been playing very well in that number 1 role. Cardwell, he's been playing. He's going to get that number 2 role, it looks like. He had a very good game against Washington State. They have some speed. They have nice blocking. I think that's going to be the difference maker because the theme of the year is they've struggled against this style of offense. In Oregon, they do it probably better than any of those teams, so I think that's going to be the difference maker in this one. 28-23, I think the Ducks are going to win this game. Another one of those contests where everyone's going to pick Utah. That's going to be a trendy pick. And the way college football works is usually that doesn't pay off. I think Oregon, though, they're going to run the ball very well. Because Utah, they struggled big time to defend the run in those games. Other than that, though, they've been very stout as a defensive unit. The secondary's been playing very well. The Oregon passing attack is not terrible. They have very talented pass catchers. Devon Williams, Johnny Johnson, named Michael Pittman. They're loaded at that position. They're not playing a secondary. It's really struggled much this year, but Oregon also being 5th nationally in 3rd down, that's also going to pay big dividends. So they're going to control the clock a little bit. Going on the road is going to be tough in Salt Lake City, but I think the Ducks will pull this one out.